Imagine stepping into a garden unlike any you've ever seen. No vibrant blooms, no rustling leaves, just stones. But these aren't ordinary rocks, haphazardly placed. They're arranged with deliberate precision, forming patterns so intricate they seem to hum with hidden meaning. This is no abandoned ruin. It's a library. A library where the books are made of stone, and the stories they tell aren't of kings or conquests, but of the very air our ancestors breathed, the rains that nourished their crops, and the winds that shaped their world. These are the ruined gardens, 30 silent sentinels scattered across the globe, each one a time capsule of Earth's ancient climate, waiting to be read. What if I told you that long before satellites, before thermometers, even before written language, civilizations had already cracked the code of tracking weather patterns? Not with paper or ink, but with granite and basalt. The Maya, the Inca, the Druids, they didn't just observe nature, they etched its rhythms into the land itself. Solstices marked by shadows stretching across carefully placed boulders, rain gauges carved into desert cliffs, wind direction archived in the erosion patterns of standing stones. These gardens weren't just beautiful, they were brilliant. They were scientific instruments disguised as art, built to outlast empires, to speak across millennia. And here's the most astonishing part, they're still speaking. Today, we're embarking on a journey to decode these stone scripts, from the solar-aligned terraces of Machu Picchu to the tsunami-carved cliffs of Portugal. Each garden holds a piece of a puzzle, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about our planet's past. How did ancient cultures predict droughts with nothing but spirals of rock? Why did they go to such lengths to preserve climate data in stone, knowing they'd never live to see it read? And what can these silent gardens teach us about the climate challenges we face today? The answers lie in the cracks, the alignments, the shadows, waiting for those who know how to look. So come with me. Let's walk these ruined gardens together and listen to the stories only stones can tell. Long before satellites circled the skies or thermometers measured the slightest breeze, ancient civilizations were already mastering the art of reading nature's rhythms, not with fragile tools, but with the very bones of the earth. Picture this, a druid priest tracing the grooves of a stone spiral after a heavy rain, watching as water pools in patterns that whisper of droughts to come. Or an Incan astronomer standing atop Machu Picchu's terraces, where the winter solstice sun cast shadows so precise they functioned like the hands of a celestial clock. These weren't mere decorations, they were living laboratories where every rock placement held meaning, every alignment a coded message from the environment. What's astonishing isn't just their ingenuity, it's their foresight. While modern climate records stretch back a few centuries at best, these stone gardens preserved data across millennia. Unlike parchment or oral traditions which fade with time, granite doesn't rot, basalt doesn't burn. A spiral carved into Irish bedrock or a grid chiseled into Jordan's cliffs could outlast kingdoms, carrying its secrets intact into the modern era. And the secrets they hold are profound. Take the Maya, whose staircases at Chichen Itza double as eclipse calculators, their shadow angles revealing not just celestial events but the droughts that followed. Or the Norse settlers of Orkney, who stacked coastal cairns to track rising tides, a silent alarm system for sea level change, written in stone instead of ink. But here's the real marvel, these gardens weren't passive records, they were interactive tools. The Celts didn't just observe rain patterns, they designed spirals to channel water in ways that mirrored tree ring growth, creating a three-dimensional climate model. The pueblones of Chaco Canyon arranged boulders to catch moonlight, transforming lunar phases into a visual guide for monsoon predictions. These weren't just scientists, they were artists, weaving data into landscapes so beautiful we almost miss their brilliance. And that's the lesson these ruins shout across the ages of resilience. When Egypt's papyrus crumbled or Mesopotamia's clay tablets shattered, stone kept its stories. Today, as we grapple with climate uncertainty, there's poetry in realizing our ancestors faced similar fears and chose to etch their solutions into the earth itself. Maybe they knew we'd need their wisdom someday. Maybe they hoped we'd be wise enough to read it. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the clouds cling to mountain peaks, the terraces of Machu Picchu rise like a stairway to the sky. But among these iconic ruins lies a lesser-known marvel, a stone garden so precisely arranged it functions as a celestial calendar. Picture this: on the morning of the winter solstice, the first rays of sunlight slice through the sacred Intihuatana stone, casting a dagger-like shadow across carefully placed markers. This isn't just a beautiful alignment, it's an agricultural almanac carved in granite. The Incan priests who designed this garden didn't need parchment or codices to record their knowledge. They built their wisdom into the land itself. What makes this solar sentinel extraordinary isn't just its accuracy, but its endurance. While oral traditions could fade with a single generation, these stones have kept their secrets for over 500 years. Each terrace, each carefully angled wall, serves a dual purpose. The steps aren't merely decorative, their heights correspond to the sun's changing elevation throughout the year. The central stone pillar doesn't just mark the solstice, it divides sunlight into measurable segments, with shadows that grow shorter or longer like the hands of a cosmic clock. Modern archaeologists have confirmed that these shadows would have told farmers exactly when to plant quinoa or potatoes, aligning cultivation with nature's rhythms down to the day. But here's what truly stuns researchers: the precision. Without telescopes or written mathematics, the Inca achieved alignments accurate to within a fraction of a degree. Some scholars believe they used reflective pools of water as primitive theodolites, mirroring the stars to calibrate their stone arrangements. Others point to the way certain terraces frame the rising of the Pleiades, a star cluster the Inca associated with crop health. What's undeniable is that this garden was both temple and textbook, where priest astronomers taught farmers to read the sky's signals in the language of stone. Perhaps most poignant is how this ancient technology still works today. Visit Machu Picchu at dawn on June 21st, and you'll witness the same shadow play that guided an empire. In an age of melting glaciers and shifting seasons, there's something humbling about stones that outlasted an entire civilization, still whispering their warnings and wisdom to anyone who knows how to listen. The Inca understood something we're only now relearning. Sometimes the most durable data storage isn't a hard drive, it's a mountain. Deep in the misty hills of County Meath, where the green of Ireland seems almost eternal, lies a stone puzzle that defies time, a massive spiral carved into the earth, its grooves winding inward like a frozen whirlpool. At first glance, it could pass for an ancient work of art, but touch the damp channels after a rainfall, and you'll feel its true purpose. This is the Druidic stone spiral, a hydraulic cipher designed by Celtic sky watchers to decode the language of droughts. Unlike modern weather stations with their flashing screens, this garden speaks in water. Each groove acts as a conduit, directing rainfall into patterns so precise they form a liquid archive. Archaeologists mapping these flows made a startling discovery. The spiral's concentric rings match the growth patterns of ancient oaks nearby. Where tree rings narrow during dry years, the spiral's channels widen, a stone and water echo of nature's ledger. The genius lies in its simplicity. During heavy rains, water rushes through the outer coils, filling reservoirs at the center. In drier seasons, only the shallowest channels retain moisture, leaving the deeper ones barren. By studying sediment layers trapped in these grooves, researchers have reconstructed rainfall records stretching back over 2,000 years. But here's what's truly remarkable. The Celts didn't just record climate shifts, they anticipated them. The spiral's design includes warning coils, sections where water pools in distinct formations before a prolonged drought. It's as if the stones themselves were trained to predict scarcity, giving communities time to store grain or shift grazing lands. What's even more fascinating is how this stone garden bridges myth and meteorology. Celtic lore speaks of the Cailleach, a divine hag who controlled winter's grip by washing her cloak in certain streams. The spiral's deepest reservoirs align with these legendary sites, suggesting the Celts wove practical climate tracking into their spiritual cosmology. Modern climatologists confirmed the link. When the spiral's central basin dried up, it coincided with periods of famine recorded in oral histories. Today, this moss-covered labyrinth still works. After a summer storm, watch how water traces the same paths it followed for millennia, whispering secrets to those who understand its flow. In an era of satellites and supercomputers, there's humility in realizing that a coil of stones, patiently shaped by hands long turned to dust, could outlast empires while keeping nature's accounts with such elegance. The Druids knew something we often forget. Sometimes the best way to measure time isn't with clocks, but with the patient dance of water over rock. Carved into the rose-red cliffs of Petra, where the desert heat shimmers like a mirage, lies a network of grooves so precise they seem drawn by a mathematician's hand. These are the desert grid's ancient rain gauges etched into sandstone by the Nabateans, a civilization that thrived in this arid landscape 2,000 years ago. At first glance, they might resemble decorative patterns or even unfinished carvings, but look closer. Each channel, each intersecting line, was meticulously designed to capture the rarest of treasures in this parched land, water. When the infrequent rains came, these grids transformed into a liquid spreadsheet, channeling every precious drop into reservoirs while recording rainfall data in a language of erosion and sediment. The brilliance of this system lies in its dual purpose. Unlike modern rain gauges that measure single events, Petra's grids logged centuries of climate history. The depth of each groove corresponds to the intensity of runoff. Deeper channels mean heavier rains. The spacing between them reveals frequency, with tighter clusters indicating periods of consistent storms. Archaeologists analyzing these patterns uncovered something astonishing. The grids contain drought signatures, stretches where the stone shows almost no erosion, marking years when the skies withheld their mercy. These silent gaps in the rock align perfectly with Nabatean inscriptions describing crop failures and trade disruptions, proving the stones remember what human records only hint at. What's even more remarkable is how these grids defy time. While scrolls decay and ink fades, sandstone endures. When sandstorms buried Petra for centuries, the grids survived intact, their data preserved like a climate time capsule. Modern laser scans revealed subtle variations in erosion that paint a vivid picture of the Nabateans' world, a golden age of reliable rains followed by a slow march toward aridity. The grids even hint at adaptation strategies. Some channels were widened over generations, suggesting adjustments to diminishing rainfall long before the city's decline. But here's the real revelation. These weren't just passive collectors. The grids funneled water into an elaborate underground cistern system, turning measurement into survival. The Nabateans didn't just record climate data, they weaponized it, using stone to cheat drought in one of Earth's harshest environments. Today, as Jordan faces modern water crises, researchers are studying these ancient grids for insights. There's poetic justice in realizing that a civilization that vanished millennia ago might still hold answers for our own thirsty world, written not in words but in the wear of water on rock. Stretching across the windswept coast of Brittany, the Carnac stones stand like an army frozen mid-March, 3,000 granite sentinels arranged in eerily straight rows over 4 kilometers. Most visitors marvel at their scale, but climate scientists see something far more profound: a 4,000-year-old weather vane carved into the landscape. Unlike solitary megaliths erected for ritual purposes, these menhirs were positioned with meticulous attention to wind patterns. Each stone tells a story not of gods or kings, but of westerly gales and summer breezes that shaped Bronze Age Europe. The secret lies in their erosion. Over centuries, prevailing winds sandblasted the stones asymmetrically, wearing one face smooth while leaving the opposite side pitted. Modern researchers armed with laser scanners have mapped these wear patterns like tree rings, reconstructing wind directions with startling accuracy. What they uncovered rewrote climatic history. The stones revealed that Bronze Age Brittany experienced winds 15% stronger than today, with dominant directions shifting dramatically around 3,500 years ago, precisely when pollen records show oak forests giving way to heather. This wasn't mere coincidence. The stones captured the moment Europe's climate turned harsher, forcing farmers to adapt their crops. Some rows even show corrective placement, where later stones were added to track new wind patterns, proving these weren't static monuments but dynamic climate logs. The real genius of Carnac's design emerges when you view it from above. The rows aren't uniform, they form subtle funnels that channeled wind between stones, amplifying its force on specific markers. Archaeologists believe these wind lenses helped ancient observers detect incremental changes invisible to the naked eye. A stone worn on its northeast face might signal coming storms, prompting communities to secure fishing boats or harvest grains early. Perhaps most remarkably, the system required no writing to interpret. Like the grooves in Ireland's spiral, the language was tactile. A shepherd brushing a hand along a stone's smooth face could read centuries of wind data without a single word. Today, as modern anemometers record increasingly erratic winds, there's sobering wisdom in these granite archives. The Carnac builders didn't just predict weather, they etched a warning into the land itself, one we're only now learning to decipher. Beneath the vast New Mexico sky, where the desert stretches endless and silent, lies a puzzle written in moonlight. The pueblones of Chaco Canyon didn't just build with stone, they wove celestial rhythms into the very land, crafting a lunar labyrinth that doubled as an ancient climate observatory. Picture this: on nights when the full moon rose over Fajada Butte, its silver light would slip between carefully positioned boulders, casting knife-edged shadows that crept across spiral petroglyphs below. But these weren't mere artistic flourishes. Each shadow's path, each interplay of light and rock, functioned like a celestial clockwork, tracking not just lunar phases but the monsoon rains that meant life or death for this desert civilization. What makes this garden extraordinary is its precision. The pueblones arranged the boulders so precisely that the moonlight's dance revealed hidden patterns in nature's chaos. During El Niño years, when Pacific Ocean temperatures shifted, monsoon rains would arrive earlier or later than usual, and the lunar shadows would respond in kind, striking different sections of the spiral. Modern researchers analyzing these alignments made a startling discovery. The shadows' positions over centuries correlate almost perfectly with tree ring records of precipitation. The stones, in effect, created a stone and light almanac, preserving rainfall data long after the people who read it had vanished. But here's the real stroke of genius. the system required no written records to maintain its accuracy. A single observer could stand in the same spot generation after generation, watching where the shadows fell, and know whether to plant corn early or store extra water. The labyrinth design even accounts for the Moon's subtle orbital shifts over 18-year cycles, ensuring its predictions remain true across lifetimes. Some petroglyphs near the site show symbols that may represent particularly wet or dry periods, a stone archive of climate anomalies etched by those who witnessed them. Today, the lunar labyrinth still whispers its secrets. Though modern telescopes can predict El Niño with satellite precision, there's something humbling about standing where ancient astronomers once stood, watching the same moon cast the same shadows they used to decode nature's whims. In an age of climate uncertainty, Chaco stones remind us that sometimes the most sophisticated tool isn't a supercomputer. It's a carefully placed rock, a patient observer, and the timeless light of the moon. In the shadow of Iceland's restless Hekla volcano, where the earth itself seems to breathe fire, a ring of basalt columns stands like a stony whirlpool frozen mid-spin. This is the volcanic vortex, a natural archive built not by human hands, but by the violent marriage of fire and ice. When eruptions spewed ash into the sky, winds carried the particles to this precise spot, where the circular formation acted like a geological catcher's mitt, trapping layers between its interlocking stones. Over centuries, these ash deposits stacked up like pages in a book, each dark stripe marking another explosive chapter in Hekla's history. Modern scientists drilling into these layers made an eerie discovery. The ash bands align perfectly with temperature records from Greenland ice cores, revealing how each eruption plunged the region into years of bitter cold. But here's what chills the spine: this wasn't just nature's accident. Viking sagas speak of frost seers who read patterns in certain stone circles to predict winters. The vortex's design suggests our Norse ancestors noticed its predictive power. The basalt columns lean inward at angles that funnel ash into specific quadrants. Heavier deposits in one sector often preceded brutal winters, likely because larger eruptions disrupted weather patterns across the North Atlantic. Archaeologists found charred bones near the site, hinting at rituals where Vikings asked the stones for clues, perhaps interpreting crackles in heated rocks thrown onto the ash as omens. The vortex's true brilliance lies in its dual timeline. While the ash layers record eruptions, the stones themselves tell another story. Lichen growth on their north faces slows during cold snaps, creating measurable bands that mirror the ash record. Together, they form a climate cross-reference more reliable than any medieval chronicle. When Hekla erupted in 1148, the vortex trapped ash so thick it blotted out sunrises for years, a darkness preserved in stone that matches Norse accounts of the mist famine when crops failed across Europe. Today, standing beside this silent sentinel, you can almost hear the echoes of Viking elders pressing ears to cold basalt, listening for whispers of winters to come. In an age of satellite forecasts, there's raw power in realizing how much our ancestors gleaned from the land itself, how a circle of fire-forged rock became both history book and crystal ball. The vortex reminds us that sometimes the earth keeps its own diaries, written in ash and ice and stone. On the windswept shores of Orkney, where the North Sea gnaws at the land with each passing century, stone cairns rise like stubborn teeth against the tide. These aren't random piles of rock, they're meticulous benchmarks placed with surgical precision by Norse settlers 2.5 millennia ago to track the sea's relentless creep. Picture a Viking child adding pebbles to a stack each spring, marking how much farther the waves reached than their grandfather's time, a living graph of encroaching waters written in granite instead of ink. Modern archaeologists studying these cairns made a chilling discovery. Their positions form a perfect chronological sequence, each new stack built slightly inland as the old ones drowned. By measuring the distances between them, researchers reconstructed sea level rise with accuracy rivaling modern satellite data, revealing that the oceans climbed nearly 3 meters since the Iron Age. The true ingenuity lies in the cairn's simplicity. Unlike fragile parchment or fading oral histories, these stones endured storms, invasions, and centuries of salt spray. Norse builders chose specific rock types, dense basalt resistant to erosion, and stacked them in alternating layers to create visual growth rings that indicated adjustments. Some cairns even contain embedded shells at precise heights, acting as natural tide gauges. When submerged during high tides, the shellfish would etch distinctive marks into the stone. These accidental scribes left behind a record so detailed, scientists can pinpoint not just long-term sea rise, but individual storm surges from 2,000 years ago. One cluster near Skara Bree shows abrupt repositioning around 300 BCE, coinciding with climatic shifts recorded in Icelandic volcanic ash layers, proof that these weren't just local anomalies, but global events witnessed in stone. But here's what's haunting: the cairns tell a story of adaptation. Later Norse settlers didn't just record the sea's advance, they engineered around it. Excavations reveal that as waters rose, they moved entire fishing villages uphill, using the cairns as relocation guides. Some stacks even incorporate whale bones, likely from stranding events caused by changing currents, as grim reminders of the ocean's power. Today, as Orkney faces modern sea level rise, these ancient markers take on new urgency. Climate scientists recently used them to calibrate models, proving that current rates of increase are 6 times faster than during the Norse era. Standing beside these cairns at twilight, as waves lap at stones placed by hands long turned to dust, you can almost hear the whispers of those who came before. They didn't need satellites or supercomputers to understand their changing world, just keen eyes, patient hands, and the humility to let the land itself keep score. In an age of melting ice caps, there's profound wisdom in these unassuming rock piles. Sometimes the most enduring science isn't about predicting the future, but remembering the past. Beneath the otherworldly spires of Cappadocia, where wind-carved fairy chimneys rise like ancient sentinels, lies an accidental seismograph written in stone. Among these soft volcanic rock formations, certain balancing stones perched precariously for centuries hold secrets not of erosion, but of earthquakes. These geological acrobats serve as nature's own tilt meters, their final resting positions after sudden falls preserving precise records of seismic shocks that would otherwise be lost to time. Modern geologists studying these toppled stones made a revelation. Each fallen angle corresponds to the intensity and direction of quakes dating back over 3,000 years. The system works with eerie precision. When tremors struck, delicately balanced rocks atop the chimneys would tumble, but not randomly. The direction of their fall points directly toward the quake's epicenter, while the distance rolled indicates magnitude. Some stones show multiple repositionings, having been reset by later civilizations only to fall again during subsequent quakes, creating a layered timeline of seismic activity. The silent gaps between these events tell their own story. Stretches where stones remained upright for centuries reveal periods of unusual tectonic calm, while clusters of fallen markers pinpoint eras of heightened instability. What's truly astonishing is how these natural alarms cross-reference with human history. One group of toppled stones near Gurim lines up perfectly with historical accounts of a devastating earthquake in 17 CE that flattened Roman cities across Anatolia. Others fell during seismic events that coincided with the abrupt abandonment of underground cities like Derinkuyu, suggesting quakes may have driven mass migrations. Even more remarkably, some ferry chimneys bear carvings indicating locals intentionally modified certain balancing stones to make them more sensitive, an ancient early warning system where a watched rock's fall could send entire communities scrambling to cavern shelters. Today, laser scans of these stones allow researchers to reconstruct quakes with startling accuracy, down to the hour they likely occurred based on shadow positions preserved in the dust beneath them. In an age of sensitive digital seismographs, there's profound wisdom in these simple stone alarms, a reminder that sometimes the Earth doesn't need technology to write its history. It just needs something to fall and someone patient enough to read the way it lands. On the windswept steppes of Mongolia, where the horizon stretches uninterrupted for miles, stand silent witnesses to winters so brutal they reshaped empires, the Deer Stones. These ancient granite pillars, carved with elaborate depictions of leaping stags and celestial symbols, hold a secret etched not by human hands, but by the unforgiving grip of cold. Look closely at their surfaces, and you'll see a network of cracks spiderwebbing across the stone, each fissure a frozen scream of medieval winters. These aren't flaws, they're climate archives. When temperatures plummeted beyond anything modern Mongolia has recorded, the stones themselves fractured, their microscopic quartz crystals expanding until the rock could bear no more. What makes these fractures so remarkable is their precision as thermometers. Scientists measuring the cracks' widths made a chilling discovery. The largest fissures align perfectly with the years 1250 to 1300, a period historians call the Little Ice Age. During these decades, winter temperatures dropped so low that Lake Hervskul froze solid enough for Mongol armies to march across a detail corroborated by both the stones and Genghis Khan's campaign records. The fractures tell a story of adaptation. Stones near migration routes show more cracking, suggesting desperate movements of people and animals fleeing frozen pastures. One particularly fractured deer stone near Karakoram, the Mongol capital, bears inscriptions celebrating an unusually mild winter, likely carved during a brief respite from the cold that allowed the empire to regroup. But here's the twist: the stones didn't just record climate shifts, they may have predicted them. Certain carvings depict what scholars once thought were abstract patterns, but now recognize as crack propagation diagrams. The ancient nomads, it seems, observed how fractures spread during successive freezes, using them to forecast harsh winters. Some deer stones were even placed as sentinels along trade routes, their fissures serving as a tactile warning system. Herders could run fingers along the cracks before journeys. If new fractures had appeared since last season, they knew to stock extra provisions. Today, these granite pillars stand as monuments to resilience. The same cracks that document terrifying temperature drops also reveal how the Mongols turned adversity into opportunity. Their empire's explosive growth during the 14th century coincides with fracture patterns showing adaptation to the cold. As modern climate models struggle to predict extreme weather, there's humbling wisdom in these stones. They remind us that sometimes the most accurate forecast isn't found in supercomputers, but in the quiet language of rock and frost, waiting centuries for someone to listen. In the heart of Mali's golden dunes, where the Sahara breathes heat like a sleeping dragon, lies a library unlike any other, the Sandstone Codex of Timbuktu. Not bound by leather or parchment, its pages are towering slabs of rock, stacked by medieval scholars to capture the desert's most fleeting treasure, rain. Each groove carved into these sandstone monoliths tells a story not of kings or conquests, but of the Sahara's forgotten whispers when this sea of sand was once a sea of grass. Unlike the grand libraries Timbuktu is famous for, this codex wasn't meant for human eyes. Its readers were the raindrops themselves, trickling through channels so precisely angled they could measure rainfall down to the millimeter. What makes these stones extraordinary isn't just their engineering, but their memory. Over centuries, rare downpours etched delicate erosion lines into the rock, each one a timestamp of wetter eras. Modern climatologists studying these grooves made a revelation. The spacing between them matches perfectly with oral histories of the Green Sahara, periods when the desert bloomed with rivers and acacia forests. One particularly deep channel corresponds to the 9th century, when Arab travelers described crossing grassy plains to reach Timbuktu, an account long dismissed as fantasy until the stones vindicated it. The codex even records droughts that forced the Mali Empire's collapse, with gaps in erosion aligning with manuscripts describing the year the wells wept dust. But here's the genius: this wasn't passive recording. The slabs functioned as a hydrological computer. Their grooves funneled water into underground cisterns, with branching channels acting like valves. During heavy rains, overflow paths directed excess to replenish distant oases, while sediment traps filtered silt to keep reservoirs clear. Some slabs bear notches that seem decorative until you realize their calibration marks ancient scientists adjusting angles after observing how water flowed differently during dry cycles. The codex didn't just document climate shifts, it helped communities survive them. Perhaps most moving is how these stones fill gaps in human memory. When Timbuktu's libraries were threatened by conflict, the codex endured, its silent testimony outlasting both paper and oral tradition. Today, as the Sahara expands anew, the slabs whisper a warning written in water and stone that deserts remember what civilizations forget. Standing before them, you can almost hear the echoes of scholars who understood that some truths are too vital to entrust to ink alone. Off the coast of Pohnpei, where the Pacific Ocean swallows the horizon, the ruins of Nan Madol rise like a ghostly jigsaw puzzle from the lagoon. This sunken city, built entirely atop coral reefs, holds a secret in its very bones, not in its towering basalt walls, but in the porous coral blocks that form its foundations. These aren't mere building materials, they're oceanic diaries, their pockmarked surfaces etching 1,000 years of the sea's changing moods. When builders stacked these coral stones centuries ago, they unknowingly created the world's most durable pH meter. Each tiny hole, each weathered crevice, tells a story of acidity levels shifting with the trade winds, preserving data modern scientists would kill to have recorded. What makes these coral blocks extraordinary is their chemistry. As seawater becomes more acidic, it dissolves coral in distinct patterns, like a thief leaving fingerprints. The higher the acidity, the more jagged and interconnected the pores become. Modern researchers using three-dimensional scans discovered something astonishing. The blocks at Nan Madol's western edge, exposed to open ocean currents, show significantly more erosion than those sheltered in the inner canals. This isn't random decay, it's a precise map of how El Niño events centuries ago redirected acidic currents, altering the very fabric of the reef. The stones even record pH spikes, sudden bursts of acidity matching oral histories of black tides when fish kills left islanders starving. But here's the twist. The builders of Nan Madol may have known exactly what they were doing. Local legends speak of the wizard-like Sordelur dynasty selecting specific coral heads for their construction, ones that sang when the waters turned bitter. Modern acoustic tests revealed that certain blocks do resonate at frequencies tied to acidity levels, meaning the stones might have literally hummed warnings as ocean chemistry shifted. Some slabs even bear carvings that align with coral erosion patterns, suggesting deliberate markers for tracking changes over generations. The real revelation, though, lies in the stone's silent testimony about human impact. Layers of coral blocks show that acidity began fluctuating wildly just as the Sordeleurs expanded their empire, coinciding with evidence of massive deforestation on Pohnpei. The coral's pores tell a cautionary tale. As runoff from cleared land smothered reefs, the stone's erosion patterns grew chaotic, mirroring the collapse of Nan Madol itself. Today, as modern oceans acidify at unprecedented rates, these sunken ruins offer a sobering parallel. The coral congregation didn't just document history, it prophesied it, whispering across centuries that when the stones crumble, empires follow. Standing knee-deep in Nan Madol's tidal canals, watching sunlight dance through the coral's ancient pores, you can almost hear the echoes of its builders. They didn't need lab coats or sensors to read the sea's distress signals, just hands pressed against singing stones, listening as the ocean wrote its autobiography in acid and time. Along Norway's jagged fjords, where the air carries the crisp scent of ice even in summer, the rune stones stand as silent witnesses to a creeping catastrophe. These aren't the famous carved monoliths telling tales of Viking exploits. These are nature's own engravings, where glaciers left their signatures in the form of deep, parallel scratches slicing across bedrock. To the untrained eye, they might look like random geological scars, but tilt your head just right, and the pattern emerges. These grooves form a timeline, marking the precise years when ice sheets began their relentless march during the Little Ice Age. What makes these glacial graffiti so extraordinary is their human context. Unlike ice cores drilled from remote polar regions, these scratched stones sit beside Viking farmsteads and fishing villages, places where people lived, worked, and ultimately fled as the cold tightened its grip. The deepest grooves cluster around 1250 CE, corresponding with Norse sagas that describe winters that never ended and fjords freezing solid enough to walk across. Some stones even bear man-made carvings adjacent to the glacial marks, crude tallies that archaeologists believe were seasonal records, like a farmer counting the unnaturally long stretches when fields remained frozen. But here's the chilling detail: the scratches aren't uniform. They fan out like spokes on a wheel, with the tightest clusters pointing northwest, the exact direction historical glaciers advanced. Modern laser scans reveal microscopic fractures within these grooves, proving the ice didn't just scrape the stones once, but returned year after year, each pass digging deeper as temperatures dropped. The stones near the fjord mouths show the most damage, matching Norse accounts of harbors becoming inaccessible as ice walls grew. Perhaps most haunting are the abandoned Viking homes found just meters from these scratched stones. Excavations show layers of hastily discarded tools and half-butchered livestock, suggesting communities evacuating as the ice swallowed their land. One rune stone near the Jostedalsbreen Glacier bears an inscription that translates roughly to "The Frost Giant Walks Again," a poetic yet terrifying acknowledgement of forces beyond human control. Today, as these same glaciers retreat at alarming speeds, the stones take on new urgency, their scratches now serving as both memorial and warning, proving that climate shifts aren't abstract concepts, but events that rewrite human lives in the unyielding language of stone and ice. Standing beside these grooved sentinels, you can almost hear the echoes of Viking children running fingers along fresh scratches each spring, watching with dread as the marks crept closer to their doorways. In an age of satellite imagery and digital climate models, there's raw power in these simple stone scars, a reminder that sometimes the most eloquent climate data isn't found in graphs or algorithms, but in the desperate etchings of ice and the abandoned homes left in its wake. In the bone-dry wastes of Oman's empty quarter, where shifting sands erase all traces of human passage, the rocks themselves weep salt, and in those crystalline tears lies the rise and fall of a legendary city. The ruins of Yuba, long dismissed as a desert mirage until satellites revealed its outline, hold a climatic cipher few expected: halite crystals sprouting like frost from sandstone walls. These aren't random mineral deposits, they're humidity fingerprints, each crystal's size and shape encoding precise details about the monsoons that once turned this wasteland into a paradise. Modern geologists chiseling samples from Yuba's collapsed towers made a revelation: the salt crystals grow in distinct layers, like tree rings, with thicker bands corresponding to periods of relentless humidity when Indian Ocean monsoons strayed hundreds of miles inland. The science behind this stone-born archive is deceptively simple. Halite crystals form when salty groundwater evaporates, leaving behind mineral residue. During humid eras, prolonged dampness allowed slow, sprawling crystal growth, resulting in large, intricate formations. Dry periods produced smaller, jagged clusters as water vanished too quickly for elaborate structures. By mapping these patterns across Yuba's ruins, researchers reconstructed a climate roller coaster: centuries of reliable rains that birthed a wealthy frankincense trading hub, followed by abrupt shifts toward aridity. The salt's testimony is heartbreakingly precise. One section of wall shows alternating thick and thin bands for generations. Then suddenly, around 300 CE, the crystals shrink to near nothing. That's the moment historians believe Yuba's wells ran dry, its caravans starved of water, and the desert reclaimed its own. But here's what chills the spine: the builders may have known their fate. Certain walls bear chisel marks where someone systematically broke off salt clusters, likely to test groundwater quality. Later layers show attempts to combat the encroaching dryness: crushed seashells mixed into mortar, a desperate bid to absorb nighttime dew, and drainage channels retrofitted to funnel every precious drop. The salt even preserves evidence of Yuba's death, though some crystals contain wind-blown sand trapped mid-growth, proving they formed during dust storms as the city choked on dunes. Today, these glittering incrustations tell a cautionary tale with modern urgency. By comparing Yuba's salt records with current monsoon patterns, scientists warn that climate shifts triggering the city's collapse mirror today's erratic weather. Standing in the ruins at noon, when sunlight sets the salt-crusted walls ablaze with light, you can almost hear the whispers of merchants who once traded here, men and women who watched their oasis wither, not comprehending that the stones were keeping score. The halite's message is clear: civilizations bloom where water allows and turn to dust when it withdraws. Yuba's ruins remind us that the difference between a thriving city and a desert mirage isn't just legend, it's written in salt. In the moss-covered stillness of Kyoto's Zen gardens, where raked gravel mimics flowing water and every stone holds intention, there's a secret hiding in plain sight, not among the living bamboo, but beneath it. Centuries ago, monks pressed fresh bamboo stalks into soft clay beds, creating molds so precise they captured the plant's cellular structure down to microscopic ridges. Over time, the bamboo decayed, but the stone casts remained, fossilizing growth patterns with scientific precision. These aren't just garden ornaments, they're climate time capsules, preserving snapshots of medieval Japan's warming world in the language of bark and bud. What makes these imprints extraordinary isn't just their artistry, but their accidental genius. The molds froze bamboo's growth cycles mid-stride, each node spacing, each stalk diameter variation encoding environmental conditions like temperature and rainfall. Modern botanists studying these casts made a revelation: bamboo grown during the Kamakura period, 1200 to 1300 CE, shows significantly wider spacing between nodes compared to modern specimens. This seemingly minor detail speaks volumes. Bamboo stretches its segments longer during warm, wet years, meaning these stone molds document a medieval climate anomaly that historical texts only vaguely describe. The imprints even show abrupt shifts around 1250 CE, when node patterns tightened dramatically, coinciding with volcanic eruptions that spewed ash across the globe and triggered years of cooler summers. But here's the twist. The Zen monks may have known they were creating more than art. Some molds bear faint ink markings along their edges, numbers that correlate with temple records of harvest yields. One particularly detailed cast near Ryongjai Temple shows a bamboo stalk with unusual sideways branching, a stress response to drought. Adjacent to it, a stone tablet lists the year's rice production, half the usual amount. The monks, it seems, were using these molds as agricultural logbooks, tracking how shifting growth patterns foretold lean seasons. The real magic lies in the mold's longevity. While medieval scrolls documenting famines crumbled or burned, these stone impressions endured, their silent testimony waiting for modern laser scanners to decode them. Today, comparing these fossilized bamboo patterns with living groves reveals another layer. Kyoto's modern stalks are growing faster and taller than their medieval counterparts, a living confirmation of our current warming trend. Standing in these gardens, running fingers over stone that remembers the touch of leaves long turned to dust, you can almost hear the whisper of monks who understood that beauty and data need not be separate, that sometimes the most profound truths grow not from words, but from the patient press of plant against clay and the steadfast memory of stone. Rising from the African savanna like a fortress of whispers, the granite walls of Great Zimbabwe hold secrets not just of kings and gold, but of the very winds that shaped a kingdom. These towering stone enclosures, built without mortar over 8 centuries ago, aren't just architectural marvels, they're ancient weather stations. They're strategic gaps and passages engineered to harness the voices of the wind. Walk through the ruins today and you'll notice something eerie. When the seasonal winds blow, certain openings hum with a low, resonant tone that carries for miles. Archaeoacoustic researchers mapping these sounds made a spine-tingling discovery. The pitches change predictably with approaching storm fronts, meaning these walls didn't just shelter people from bad weather, they sang its arrival. The genius lies in the precision of the gaps. Each opening corresponds to wind directions prevalent during different seasons, narrow slits for the dry harmattan, winds from the northeast, wider portals for the rain-bearing monsoon gusts from the southeast. But here's the stroke of brilliance. The wall's curved surfaces act like natural amplifiers, bending sound waves so that specific frequencies resonate across the valley. During tests, scientists found that storm winds produce a distinctive two-tone harmonic as they rush through the gaps, a phenomenon the Shona people likely recognized as an early warning system. Oral histories speak of listening stones where sentries stood, their ears tuned to shifts in the granite song. What's even more remarkable is how these acoustic properties align with the kingdom's layout. The royal enclosures sit at the acoustic focal point, meaning a storm warning humming through the walls would reach the rulers first, a deliberate design allowing swift decisions about harvests or livestock. Lower status dwellings radiate outward in descending pitch sensitivity, creating a hierarchical alert system. Some walls even feature tuning grooves, subtle carvings that adjust resonance, proving this wasn't accidental but meticulously calibrated. Modern meteorologists comparing these sound patterns with rainfall records found uncanny correlations. The wall's lowest recorded frequencies match years of catastrophic droughts preserved in sediment cores. But the real magic emerges at night. When the moon heats the granite after sunset, the stone contracts with audible pops and cracks. The Shona called these sounds the stone speaking, and they weren't wrong. Thermal imaging reveals that certain stress fractures align with wind gaps, creating micro-vibrations that amplify nocturnal wind shifts. Farmers likely learned to interpret these nighttime creaks as forecasts. A groaning wall might signal morning rains, while silence often preceded dry spells. Today, as climate change alters Africa's wind patterns, archaeologists note something unsettling. The walls are singing differently. The monsoons arrive later now, their tones distorted, as if the stones themselves are struggling to recalibrate their ancient warnings. Standing in the ruins at dusk, when the granite's thermal song mingles with the wind's dirge, you can almost hear the ghosts of a civilization that didn't just build with stone, but listened to it. A people who understood that sometimes the most vital forecasts don't come from the sky, but from the very earth beneath your feet. In the frozen heart of Siberia, where winter's grip lasts 10 months of the year, a circle of stone stands sentinel over secrets buried in ice. This is the Ice Age iris, a silent witness to temperatures so extreme they sculpted continents. Unlike the towering megaliths of Europe or the intricate carvings of Mesoamerica, this Yakutian circle is deceptively simple. Just weathered boulders arranged in concentric rings, their edges softened by millennia of wind and snow. But kneel beside them in summer when the permafrost thaws and the truth emerges. The ground beneath these stones doesn't melt evenly. Instead, it forms precise, petal-like patterns of mud and ice, each layer a page in Earth's climatic diary. What makes this garden extraordinary isn't its grandeur, but its precision. The stones act like thermal conductors, absorbing sunlight and directing heat into the soil below at measured rates. Over centuries, this created a natural freeze-thaw clock. During warmer periods, the thawed area expands outward in broad rings, like ripples in a pond. Colder eras leave tight, jagged patterns, nature's own barcode for temperature swings. Researchers using ground-penetrating radar made a revelation. These rings match perfectly with ice core samples from Greenland, corroborating global climate events like the Younger Dryas cold snap 12,000 years ago. But here's what ice cores can't tell us: the iris records hyperlocal responses. One narrow ring from 3,200 years ago corresponds with indigenous Evany legends of the summer that never came, when entire herds of reindeer perished. The real genius lies in the stone's placement. Unlike random boulders scattered by glaciers, these were deliberately positioned atop underground ice wedges, natural amplifiers of thermal changes. Each ring aligns with cracks in the ice below, creating a magnifying effect that makes subtle temperature shifts visible to the naked eye. Ancient hunters likely noticed these patterns first, using them to predict migrations of woolly mammoths, whose preserved remains are often found near similar circles. Some stones even bear grooves that may have held wooden markers, suggesting generations added to this living chart as the climate evolved. But the most haunting insight comes from the iris's modern behavior. In recent decades, the outermost rings have expanded at unprecedented rates, their once crisp edges blurring as the permafrost softens. Thermal cameras show heat radiating differently through these stones now, a silent alarm echoing across millennia. Standing among them, you can almost hear the whispers of ancient shamans who read these patterns like a weather forecast, their survival hinging on the slow dance of stone and ice. In an age of satellite temperature maps, there's raw power in this Arctic Circle's simplicity, a reminder that sometimes the clearest warnings come not from flashing screens, but from the patient testimony of rocks remembering winters the world has forgotten. At the heart of Chichen Itza, where the Kukulkan Pyramid pierces the Yucatan sky, a stone staircase hides a celestial secret in plain sight. These aren't just steps for climbing, they're a solar calendar carved in limestone with shadows that slither like serpents during equinoxes. But look closer at the carvings flanking the staircase, and you'll spot something even more extraordinary: intricate glyphs that lie dormant in sunlight, only awakening during the rarest of cosmic events. When a solar eclipse darkens the sky, these engravings catch the angled light in a way that makes them appear to glow from within, marking the exact moment the moon swallows the sun. Modern archaeologists studying these eclipse glyphs made a chilling discovery. Their alignments correspond with drought records preserved in nearby cave stalagmites, proving the Maya didn't just predict eclipses, they documented their catastrophic consequences. The precision of this stone calendar borders on supernatural. Each glyph is positioned so that sunlight during an eclipse strikes at a precise angle, illuminating first the date, then the duration, and finally the predicted impact, all encoded in a visual language modern scholars are still deciphering. One particularly vivid engraving shows a skeletal sun god with water jars pouring upward instead of down, a dire symbol of inverted rains. This glyph aligns perfectly with an eclipse in 900 CE that tree rings show coincided with a 7-year drought. But here's what's truly unsettling: the Maya didn't just record these events, they anticipated them. Mathematical analysis reveals the staircase's 75 steps represent the 52-year calendar round cycle multiplied by eclipse intervals, allowing priests to calculate when deadly alignments might recur. What makes these engravings more than just astronomical records is their visceral connection to survival. During the infamous mega-drought of the 9th century, when cities across the Maya world collapsed, Chichen Itza's priests added emergency carvings, smaller, rougher glyphs squeezed between the originals. These late additions tell a story of desperation. One shows a hand reaching into an empty maize stalk, another a rain god turned to stone. The stones even preserve evidence of ritual responses, dark stains from copal incense burned in frantic ceremonies, their residue concentrated around drought prediction glyphs. The real genius lies in the staircase's dual purpose as both warning system and historical archive. Unlike bark paper codices that could burn, these engravings endured, their shadows casting the same apocalyptic prophecies century after century. Today, when a solar eclipse crosses Chichen Itza, something eerie happens. The ancient glyphs still light up as they did 1,000 years ago, their messages undimmed by time. As modern satellites track climate shifts from space, there's profound humility in standing where Maya astronomers once stood, watching stone carvings flicker to life with warnings we're only now learning to fully understand. That when the sky's great eye blinks closed, the earth below gasps for water. On the windswept slopes of Easter Island, where the iconic Moai statues stand guard over a vanished civilization, there's a hidden archive written not in stone, but in the slow, patient growth of lichen. While most visitors fixate on the statues' solemn faces, it's their backs that hold the real treasure: lichen colonies clinging to the porous volcanic rock, their growth patterns preserving a startling record of ultraviolet radiation stretching back centuries. These unassuming patches of green and gold aren't just survivors of harsh Pacific winds. They're living climate diaries, their very cells encoding the island's atmospheric history in a language only modern science has learned to read. The secret lies in the lichen's bizarre resilience. Unlike plants that wither under intense UV light, these organisms produce protective pigments, nature's own sunscreen, when radiation spikes. Over time, these pigments accumulate in distinct layers within the stone's microscopic pores, creating bands of color visible under ultraviolet lamps. Researchers scraping samples from the Moai's sheltered backs made a revelation. The darkest bands align perfectly with known ozone depletion events, including the massive volcanic eruption of Krakatoa in 1883, which spewed sulfur dioxide high into the atmosphere. But here's what's truly astonishing: the lichens also recorded UV spikes with no obvious cause, suggesting Easter Island's ancient inhabitants may have witnessed unexplained atmospheric phenomena long before modern monitoring began. What makes this garden unique is its accidental precision. The Moai stone, called tuff, acts like a sponge, absorbing and stabilizing the lichen's chemical signatures for centuries. Some statues positioned near old quarries show radically different growth patterns than those on the coast, proving the rock's composition subtly filters UV exposure, creating hyperlocal climate records. One Moai's lichen bands reveal a prolonged UV surge around 1600 CE, right when oral histories describe a time of burning shadows that drove islanders to seek shelter in caves. Modern analysis suggests this could mark a solar minimum, when Earth's weakened magnetic field allowed more cosmic radiation to penetrate the atmosphere. But the real stroke of genius belongs to the lichens themselves. Certain species growing on the Moai only flourish under specific UV conditions, their presence or absence acting like a biological switch. By mapping these species across different statues, scientists reconstructed a gradient of historical radiation. Statues near Raraku volcano host lichens indicating consistently higher UV, likely due to sulfur emissions from dormant vents. This explains why some Moai were deliberately moved downhill over generations, possibly following lichen-documented safe zones as atmospheric conditions shifted. Today, these silent sentinels take on new urgency. Comparing the Moai's lichen bands with modern satellite data reveals an unsettling trend. UV spikes are now 10 times more frequent than in pre-industrial times. Yet the lichens also offer hope. Some species have begun producing novel pigments not seen in older layers, suggesting adaptation in real time. Standing beside these weathered giants at sunset, watching their backs glow faintly under handheld UV lights, you can almost hear the whispers of Rapa Nui ancestors who revered these stones. They didn't know about ozone or radiation, but they understood something profound: that the earth speaks through the most humble of scribes, and sometimes the most vital histories grow slowly, silently, in the unlikeliest of places. Buried beneath the sun-baked ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, where the Indus Valley civilization thrived over 4,000 years ago, lies a hidden ledger of catastrophe, not carved in stone, but baked into the very bricks that built this ancient metropolis. At first glance, these uniform clay blocks seem unremarkable, but slice one open and the truth spills out. Delicate bands of silt and sand running through them like tree rings, each layer a frozen moment when floodwaters swallowed the city. These aren't manufacturing flaws, they're fossilized floodlines, a geological chronicle of the deluges that ultimately unraveled one of humanity's first experiments with urban living. What makes these bricks extraordinary is their unintentional precision. When Indus Valley builders gathered clay from riverbanks to make their construction materials, they unknowingly incorporated that year's flood sediments into every batch. During particularly catastrophic years, like the Great Flood of 1900 BC, the silt layers grow dramatically thicker, sometimes making up a third of the brick's volume. Modern geologists studying these bands made a chilling correlation. The flood sequences match exactly with layers of abandoned households found in the ruins, proving that when the bricks carried more sediment, the city lost more people. Some bricks near the citadel show repaired sections where ancient laborers patched flood-damaged walls with newer, cleaner bricks, a desperate attempt to rebuild between disasters. But here's where the story twists. These bricks don't just record floods, they predicted them. The Indus people seemed to recognize patterns in the river's rage. Archaeologists found generation bricks in Mohenjo-Daro's foundations, specially marked blocks that builders placed every 17 years, corresponding with cyclical monsoon shifts. Even more remarkably, later construction phases show them adapting. Upper layers of the city use bricks mixed with straw and gravel for reinforcement, a direct response to the sediment records in older bricks crumbling under repeated floods. The stones, it seems, were teaching them how to survive. The real tragedy lies in the bricks' final chapters. In the uppermost ruins, the sediment bands grow so thick they destabilize the bricks entirely. Some contain more river silt than clay. These late-stage blocks crumble at the slightest touch, mirroring the civilization itself disintegrating under relentless floods. Yet even in collapse, they preserved one last secret: thin layers of salty deposits in the final bricks, proving the floods grew so frequent that seawater began backing up the Indus River, poisoning the farmland that fed the city. Standing among these ruined walls today, running fingers over bricks that remember the weight of ancient floodwaters, you can almost hear the echoes of a people who read the earth's warnings in clay and silt, who fought to adapt until the river itself became their executioner. In an age of rising seas and extreme weather, Mohenjo-Daro's crumbling bricks whisper across millennia that civilizations aren't undone by single disasters, but by the slow, sure accumulation of warnings written in the very materials we trust to shelter us. In the endless sea of Mauritania's Sahara, where dunes shift like restless sleepers, the desert holds a concert without sound, the singing stones of Wadain. These towering monoliths, some twice the height of a person, aren't silent sentinels but inadvertent musicians, their bases sculpted by wind into perfect resonating chambers. When the harmattan blows, it doesn't just whistle past these stones, it makes them hum, each gust producing vibrations so precise they can be measured like notes on a scale. But these aren't random frequencies. The pitch and duration of their songs encode a startling history, the slow, suffocating advance of the desert itself. What makes these stones extraordinary isn't just their music, but their memory. Over centuries, wind abrasion carved their bases into unique shapes, some concave like bowls, others tapered like flutes, each design responding to prevailing wind patterns of its era. Modern geologists armed with laser vibrometers discovered something haunting. The stone's resonant frequencies cluster into distinct groups, each corresponding to a phase of Sahara's expansion. The oldest stones, their bases worn smooth by consistent winds, produce deep, steady tones, a sonic fingerprint of the lush green Sahara, period when winds were gentler and more predictable. Younger stones, shaped during the desert's rapid advance, emit jagged, erratic harmonics, mirroring the turbulent winds of a drying climate. The real revelation came when researchers matched these acoustic signatures with sediment cores. Stones that sang at 380 Hz stood where pollen records showed sudden shifts from grass to sand. Others vibrating at higher frequencies marked the arrival of megadunes, their tones sharpening as encroaching sands altered wind flow. Some monoliths even bear Neolithic carvings that may hold the key to interpreting their songs, spiral patterns whose curvature increases with each layer, possibly representing generations of nomads tracking changing tones as drought worsened. But here's the spine-tingling detail. The stones still sing today, and their songs are changing. Recent recordings show frequencies spiking unpredictably, a dissonance that mirrors modern satellite data of accelerating desertification. Some monoliths near Nouakchott now produce harmonics not heard in their older layers, an acoustic alarm that the desert is advancing faster than at any point in the last 6,000 years. Standing beside them as dusk falls, when temperature gradients make the air hum, you can almost hear the whispers of ancient herders who paused here, pressing ears to warm stone, listening for warnings carried on the wind. In an age of climate models and drought indices, There's profound humility in realizing that the most eloquent desertification forecast might not come from a supercomputer, but from a vibration in a rock passed down through millennia like a lullaby from the earth itself. On the sacred slopes of Mauna Kea, where ancient Hawaiians built temples to commune with the gods, the stones themselves hold the breath of the sky. These aren't ordinary temple platforms, they're living barometers crafted from porous basalt blocks that inhale moisture from the air like geological lungs. Each pitted lava stone, placed with intention centuries ago, functions as a precision scale for humidity, its weight fluctuating subtly with the ebb and flow of invisible raindrops in the atmosphere. Modern researchers lifting these stones with calibrated equipment made a startling discovery. The rocks are heavier during wet seasons by measurable amounts, some gaining nearly 2 pounds as their microscopic chambers fill with water vapor. This weight difference isn't random, it's a coded record of pre-colonial rain cycles, written in the language of stone and air. The brilliance of this system lies in its simplicity and permanence. Unlike wooden structures that rot or cloth that frays, these basalt blocks endure, their vesicular structure acting like a sponge with perfect memory. When humid trade winds blow in from the northeast, moisture condenses inside the stone's countless air pockets, adding imperceptible weight. During droughts, the water evaporates, leaving the rocks lighter. Temple priests likely noticed this phenomenon through ritual practice. Certain ceremonial stones required more strength to lift during rainy periods, becoming living omens of abundance or scarcity. Some platforms even incorporate indicator stones, are specific basalt blocks with known dry weights carved into their bases, allowing quick comparison during seasonal ceremonies. But here's where the stones reveal their true sophistication. Not all basalt is equal. The Hawaiians selected rocks with particular porosity levels for different temple functions. Stones near agricultural shrines show higher absorption rates, ideal for tracking rains crucial to taro crops. Those near fishing shrines use denser basalt less affected by humidity, possibly to monitor longer-term climate trends affecting ocean currents. Modern climate scientists comparing these weight variations with core samples from Lake Waiau found uncanny correlations. The stone's moisture content aligns perfectly with sediment layers marking wet and dry periods over the last 800 years. The most profound revelation comes from the stone's silent testimony about human adaptation. In temple ruins near Kohala, archaeologists found basalt blocks arranged in concentric circles, each ring representing different humidity thresholds. Oral histories describe kahuna priests moving between these circles during ceremonies, interpreting the stone's collective weight like a giant atmospheric scale. When the outermost stones grew heavy, it signaled coming rains. When only the innermost rings retained moisture, drought warnings spread across the island. This wasn't just observation, it was predictive science. The stones near Kona's leeward coast show signs of being reheated and cooled to reset their absorption rates, suggesting priests calibrated them like instruments before important forecasts. Today, these temple platforms still work. On humid mornings, moisture beads on their surfaces just as it did when priests walked among them. Modern researchers using hyperspectral imaging can see the water content shifting inside the basalt's pores, watching the same signals ancient Hawaiians interpreted with hands and eyes alone. There's profound poetry in realizing that a civilization without written language found a way to make stones speak the sky's secrets, not through carvings or symbols, but through the patient accumulation of dew and breath in volcanic rock. As climate change alters Hawaii's rainfall patterns, these basalt barometers take on new urgency, their ancient data helping scientists understand what the stones might say about our uncertain future. Standing beside them at dawn, when the first light turns moisture on their surfaces to glittering diamonds, you can almost hear the echo of kahuna chanting to the rising sun, their hands resting on stones that remember every whisper of rain. Beneath the sun-baked island of Malta, where the Mediterranean laps against golden limestone cliffs, lies a labyrinth that doesn't just echo, it speaks. The hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, a subterranean temple carved 3,000 years before the pyramids, holds a secret in its very breath. Descend into its womb-like chambers, and you'll notice something unsettling. The walls whisper back. But these aren't random reverberations. The pitch and duration of each echo shift imperceptibly with the weight of the air above, turning the entire complex into a colossal barometer. Modern acousticians mapping these sound waves made a spine-tingling discovery: certain frequencies only emerge when atmospheric pressure drops, signaling approaching storms long before clouds darken the horizon. What makes these acoustic altars extraordinary is their precision. The hypogeum's creators sculpted the chambers with mathematical intentionality, carving resonance niches at exact intervals to amplify specific harmonics. One oval room, known as the Oracle Chamber, produces a deep hum at 55 Hz, a frequency that modern meteorologists associate with low-pressure systems. When the Mediterranean's infamous Gregale winds gather strength, the chamber's tone sharpens to a piercing 63 Hz, a phenomenon replicated in wind tunnel tests. But here's where it chills the spine. The walls bear spiral carvings that mirror these sound wave patterns, suggesting the builders didn't just observe these changes, they documented them. Some niches even show where patterns from repeated touching, as if priest forecasters ran hands along the stone to feel vibrations too subtle for untrained ears. The real stroke of genius lies in the hypogeum's layered design. Lower chambers resonate with incoming storms, while upper rooms respond to clearing weather, creating a stereo effect that tracks atmospheric shifts in real time. Archaeologists found evidence of sound markers, small stones placed in wall recesses that would vibrate audibly when certain frequencies activated. Oral traditions speak of the singing stone, a now-lost stalactite that supposedly rang like a bell before summer thunderstorms. Modern laser scans of the ceiling reveal where it once hung, directly beneath a resonance hotspot that still amplifies humidity changes today. Perhaps most haunting is how these sound patterns cross-reference with Malta's ancient survival strategies. Grain silos dug near the hypogeum's entrance show seasonal filling patterns that align with acoustic records, more storage following periods of frequent storm warnings. Skeletal remains from the site exhibit ear bones with unusual thickening, possibly an evolutionary adaptation in those who spent generations listening to the stone's forecasts. Today, as climate change alters Mediterranean weather patterns, the hypogeum's ancient technology takes on new urgency. During a freak low-pressure event in 2020, the Oracle Chamber spontaneously produced a tone not heard in living memory, a deep, shuddering C-sharp that matched no modern weather model. It lasted precisely 37 minutes, then ceased as abruptly as it began, leaving acousticians to wonder, were the stones trying to tell us something we've forgotten how to hear? Standing in the hypogeum's deepest chamber, where the walls still hum with the memory of 3,000 years of storms, you can almost feel the presence of those who came before, people who didn't just build with stone, but taught it to sing the sky's secrets. In an age of satellite forecasts, there's humility in realizing that sometimes the most accurate weather prediction doesn't come from a supercomputer's calculations, but from the resonance of a carved limestone chamber, waiting patiently for someone to listen. Baked into the sun-dried bricks of Çatalhöyük, where humanity first experimented with urban life 9,000 years ago, lies a code written not in symbols but in cracks. These Neolithic walls, studded with broken pottery like geological scars, hold an unexpected secret. Their very deformities are a climate archive. Unlike modern instruments that measure humidity in percentages, these ancient builders embedded ceramic shards into their dwellings as living sensors. When the air grew damp, the clay expanded. During droughts, it contracted. Over centuries, these subtle movements warped entire walls into undulating waves, each curve a frozen snapshot of a long-vanished season. Modern archaeologists running three-dimensional scans of these bulges made a revelation. The patterns match perfectly with sediment cores from nearby Lake Conneaut, proving these walls weren't just shelter. They were the world's first hygrometers. The genius lies in the shard's accidental properties. Pottery fragments discarded from daily use became unintended climate tools. As humidity seeped into their porous surfaces, the clay expanded at a predictable rate, about 0.02% per 10% humidity increase. When builders pressed these shards into wet mortar between bricks, they unknowingly created a responsive system. Wet years left walls gently bowed outward like swollen bookshelves. Dry periods pulled them taut as drumskins. Some sections show repairs where Neolithic homeowners patched over severe warping, their finger marks still visible in the plaster, a tactile record of their struggle against the elements. But here's what's truly astonishing. The walls didn't just react, they predicted. Certain walls near grain storage rooms incorporate larger, thinner shards that warp dramatically at specific humidity thresholds. These early warning panels likely alerted residents to coming dampness that could spoil harvests. One particularly telling section in Shrine Complex B.60 features alternating layers of pottery and obsidian chips, a deliberate contrast between materials that expand and resist moisture. The resulting zigzag pattern mirrors modern graphs of seasonal humidity swings, suggesting these ancient engineers recognized and exploited the differential. The most haunting insights come from the wall's silent testimony about collapse. In the settlement's final layers, the warping grows erratic, with some walls buckling inward while others twist sideways. This isn't random decay, it's the signature of climate chaos. Pollen samples confirm that Çatalhöyük's decline coincided with wildly oscillating wet-dry cycles, precisely the conditions that would overstress their ceramic-embedded architecture. The very system they devised to monitor stability became, in the end, a record of its undoing. Today, running a hand along these undulating walls, feeling the ghostly ridges where Neolithic hands once smoothed plaster over shifting clay, you're touching more than ruins. You're touching humanity's first attempt to build dialogue with the climate into the bones of a home. In an age of smart sensors and digital dashboards, there's raw poetry in these humble bulges, proof that sometimes the most profound data isn't displayed on screens, but baked into the walls that shelter us, waiting centuries for someone to read their silent story. Above the shadowy passage of Newgrange, where Ireland's ancient dead once rested, the stone ceiling holds a map not of the earth but of the heavens. Thousands of tiny chisel marks scatter across the tomb's inner chamber, their arrangement seeming random until you view them under the precise lighting of the winter solstice sunrise. Then the truth emerges. These aren't mere tool marks, but a celestial catalogue, each indentation placed to mirror the brightest stars as they appeared over 5,000 years ago. Modern archaeoastronomers painstakingly mapped these pockmarks against historical star charts and made a revelation that chills the spine. Certain clusters align perfectly with records of supernova that would have blazed like second suns in Earth's ancient skies. What makes this star map extraordinary isn't just its accuracy, but its timing. The tomb's builders didn't just record these cosmic explosions, they linked them to climate crises on the ground. Pollen samples from the tomb's floor show layers of ash and weed pollen coinciding with the supernova markings, evidence of sudden cold snaps that turned fertile lands barren. One particularly dense cluster of ceiling marks mirrors the position of the Vela supernova, which erupted around 3000 BC. The same era Irish bog oaks show stunted growth from a decade-long winter. The stones tell a story not just of observation but of correlation. When new stars burned unnaturally bright in the sky, frost bit deep into the earth. The real stroke of genius lies in how the builders encoded this knowledge. The star marks aren't uniform, some are deep cups, others shallow scratches. Spectrographic analysis reveals the deeper marks correspond to supernova visible for weeks or months, while fainter stars get delicate nicks. Most astonishing are the trails, sequences of marks showing how certain stars moved over nights or weeks. One such trail near the entrance charts the path of what was likely a brilliant comet, its appearance timed with a layer of sediment containing charred barley grains, a frozen moment when the sky's warning came too late for that year's harvest. But the most haunting insight comes from the marks' arrangement. They aren't scattered randomly across the ceiling, but concentrated along the path of the Milky Way as it would have appeared during the winter solstice. This was no casual stargazing, it was targeted monitoring of the galactic plane, where supernova most frequently occur. Some researchers believe the tomb's famous solstice light show served dual purpose, not just marking the new year, but providing annual conditions to read the ceiling under ideal lighting. The builders may have used the sunlight's shifting angles to highlight different star groups year by year, creating a rotating celestial bulletin board. Today, as astronomers track increasing supernova activity in our galactic neighborhood, Newgrange's star-scored stones take on new urgency. Their silent testimony suggests our ancestors understood something we're only now relearning, that the universe's violent beauty doesn't just light up the night sky, but reaches down to touch the very soil beneath our feet. Standing in the tomb's darkness, watching solstice sunlight creep across those ancient chisel marks, you can almost hear the whispers of the watchers who came before. People who didn't just look up at the stars, but recognized their power to shape the story of life on Earth. Along Portugal's rugged coastline, where the Atlantic's fury meets unyielding cliffs, the stone itself seems to recoil in frozen terror. The cliffs of Nazaré don't just stand against the sea, they remember its rage, their undulating layers forming petrified tsunamis that tell of storms so colossal they dwarf anything recorded in human history. These rippled rock faces, long admired for their wave-like beauty, are now recognized as one of Earth's most terrifying climate archives. Each curve, each contorted stratum, preserves the fingerprint of prehistoric mega-storms that reshaped continents. Geologists studying these formations made a chilling discovery through sediment analysis. The most dramatic undulations correspond with periods of intense North Atlantic hurricanes, when sea levels were nearly 20 feet higher than today. The cliffs act like a geological tape recorder. The tighter the stone's ripples, the more violent the storms that formed them. One particularly warped section dates to approximately 3,200 years ago, matching evidence of a civilization-collapsing tempest that swept across Bronze Age Europe. The stone's tortured layers show this wasn't just a single catastrophic event, but decades of back-to-back superstorms that pummeled the coastline like a never-ending siege. What makes these petrified waves unique is their forensic detail. Unlike ocean sediment cores that blur individual storm events, Nazaré's cliffs preserve distinct signature layers for each mega hurricane. Some show bands of marine fossils abruptly mixed with terrestrial debris, evidence of waves powerful enough to rip up seafloor creatures and hurl them far inland. Others contain rip-up clasts, fragments of older rock layers torn loose and re-embedded upside down by the sheer hydraulic force of the tsunamis. The most terrifying revelation comes from the cliff's magnetic properties. Certain mineral alignments indicate these storms generated electrical activity so intense it temporarily remagnetized the rock as lightning struck the same spots repeatedly. But the true genius of this stone archive lies in its predictive power. The cliff's patterns reveal a cyclical nature to these cataclysms, clusters of mega-storms occurring roughly every 1,500 years, aligned with periods of rapid oceanic warming. Modern climate models fed this data now suggest we're entering a similar warming phase, raising haunting questions about whether Nazare's stone waves are both memorial and prophecy. As if to underscore this point, in 2020, Storm Hercules detached a section of cliff that had remained stable since Roman times, its freshly exposed layers showing ripple patterns nearly identical to those from the last mega-storm cycle. Standing beneath these contorted cliffs today, watching modern waves crash against stone that still bears the scars of ancient tempests, you're witnessing more than geology. You're seeing time itself folded into rock, a warning carved not by human hands but by the ocean's relentless memory. The petrified waves whisper a truth we're only beginning to grasp, that the sea keeps score and its ledger is written in stone. Across the rolling green hills of Avebury, where England's largest stone circle stands sentinel, the rocks themselves pulse with hidden energy. These aren't just monuments to ancient beliefs, they're geological compass needles, their iron-rich cores preserving a record of Earth's magnetic tantrums over millennia. Unlike the more famous Stonehenge, Avebury's megaliths contain a secret written not in their alignment with the stars, but in the very metal coursing through their veins. When Neolithic builders selected these particular sarsen stones, they unknowingly chose natural magnets, their iron oxide veins acting like frozen snapshots of a magnetic field in constant flux. Modern geophysicists wielding magnetometers made a startling discovery. The stone's magnetic signatures don't match today's north. They point in dozens of different directions, marking centuries of dramatic polar shifts that would have scrambled ancient navigation systems and sparked celestial panic. The true revelation lies in the stone's precision as climate proxies. When Earth's magnetic field weakens during geomagnetic storms, a phenomenon caused by solar flares and cosmic disturbances, more radiation reaches the surface, damaging crops and altering weather patterns. Avebury's builders seem to have recognized this connection. Certain stones cluster in groups with matching magnetic orientations, their placement corresponding with archaeological evidence of agricultural shifts. One particular outlier stone, nicknamed the storm marker by researchers, points due south when all others align northeast. Soil samples from its base contain layers of charred grain, suggesting it may have marked periods when auroras blazed so brightly they were visible at midday, events linked to crop failures across Bronze Age Europe. But the stone's genius extends beyond mere recording. The Avebury complex forms a series of concentric circles, with inner rings featuring stones containing higher iron concentrations. During magnetic storms, these central megaliths would have literally vibrated, not enough for human perception, but sufficiently to disturb birds and insects. Ancient observers may have noticed swallows avoiding certain stones or bees altering hive placements, interpreting these subtle cues as geomagnetic warnings. Some stones even bear cup-shaped depressions that fill with rainwater. Researchers found these miniature pools develop concentric ripples during magnetic disturbances, possibly serving as early detection devices. The most haunting evidence comes from the stone's silent testimony about societal collapse. Layers of sediment near the southern circle reveal abrupt changes in magnetic mineral alignment around 1200 BC, precisely when pollen records show a sudden shift from wheat to hardier barley cultivation. This wasn't just changing tastes, it was adaptation. The stone's magnetic memory suggests a centuries-long polar wander event made traditional farming untenable, forcing Aveberry's descendants to abandon sacred crops or starve. Today, as satellites monitor our own weakening magnetic field, these moss-covered sentinels take on new urgency. Their tilted iron veins whisper a warning we're only beginning to comprehend, that the invisible forces shaping our climate aren't just on Earth or in the sky, but in the very rocks beneath our feet. Standing among these weathered giants at dusk, when the last light paints their iron streaks like liquid fire, you can almost feel the presence of the astronomers' farmers who raised them. They didn't need satellites to understand the cosmos' impact on their survival, just the patience to listen to stones that hum with the memory of 1,000 vanished harvests. In an age of GPS and genetically modified crops, there's profound humility in realizing that sometimes the most advanced agricultural technology isn't a drone or a database, it's a rock that remembers which way the world turned when the skies burned. Buried beneath the ashen ruins of ancient Thera, where the Mediterranean sun bakes whitewashed walls, lies a crime scene frozen in time, not of human violence, but of Earth's explosive fury. The pumice blocks scattered across Santorini's archaeological sites aren't just rubble. They're sulfur-stained timekeepers, each porous surface preserving chemical fingerprints of the catastrophic eruption that shattered the island 3,600 years ago. To the naked eye, these lightweight stones appear innocuous, but under ultraviolet light, they reveal eerie yellow-green fluorescence, the ghostly glow of sulfur compounds absorbed during the volcano's death throes. Modern geochemists analyzing these traces made a revelation that rewrote climate history. The sulfur isotopes trapped in these stones match exactly with acid layers in Greenland ice cores, proving this wasn't just a local disaster, but a planetary climate event that chilled skies from Egypt to China. The brilliance of these pumice archives lies in their accidental precision. When Thera's magma chamber exploded, it blasted sulfur dioxide gas high into the stratosphere, where it transformed into reflective sulfate aerosols. These tiny particles circled the globe, blocking sunlight and triggering years of failed harvests, an effect captured in both the stones and human records. Egyptian papyri from Ahmose I's reign describe years of darkness and Nile floods failing, while Chinese bamboo annals report summer frosts destroying mulberry trees. But here's what the pumice adds: the sulfur signatures vary across the island, creating a volcanic Rosetta Stone. Stones near Akrotiri bear heavier sulfur isotopes, marking the eruption's initial, most gas-rich phase when winds carried chemicals northeast toward Anatolia. Those buried in Fera's cliffs show lighter isotopes, evidence of later explosive stages that polluted Mediterranean skies. But the stone's true genius emerges in their silent testimony about human resilience. Thera's ruins contain pumice blocks deliberately reused in rebuilt walls, their porous surfaces scrubbed clean of ash but still sulfur-rich. These recycled stones form a haunting timeline. Pre-eruption walls use pristine pumice, while post-collapse constructions incorporate scorched blocks, as if the survivors wanted to remember the catastrophe in the very bones of their new homes. Some pumice fragments bear carvings, possibly tally marks tracking years of cold summers. One particularly telling block found near a Minoan bakery shows sulfur concentrations spiking in its deepest pores, evidence it was exposed during the eruption's deadliest hours. then repurposed as a grinding stone, its surface worn smooth by generations of kneading dough in the volcanic winter's shadow. Today, these glowing stones speak with modern urgency. By comparing Thera's sulfur ratios with those from recent eruptions like Mount Pinatubo, climatologists have recalibrated models of volcanic winters. The data suggests Thera's explosion was 30% more sulfur-rich than previously believed, enough to cool the northern hemisphere by 2 degrees Celsius for nearly a decade. Standing among Santorini's whitewashed alleys at dusk, watching UV lamps make the pumice fragments in museum walls pulse like fireflies, you're witnessing more than geology. You're seeing the birth of climate science, encoded in stones that outlived empires. Thera's ruins remind us that the Earth's most violent whispers often leave the quietest marks, traces waiting centuries for someone to read them. High on the wind-swept Altiplano of Bolivia, where the air is so thin it scatters sunlight into liquid gold, the ruins of Tiwanaku guard a secret written in stone and sky. Among the colossal temple blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, lie unassuming cobblestones pockmarked with perfectly drilled holes, each no wider than a finger, yet together forming a celestial codex. For centuries, these perforations were dismissed as ritual artifacts or construction aids, until a team of archaeoastronomers noticed something extraordinary. When viewed at dawn during the winter solstice, the holes align precisely with the shimmering ribbons of the Andean auroras, an atmospheric phenomenon so rare at these latitudes that modern science only confirmed its existence in 2014. What makes these cosmic cobbles remarkable isn't just their alignment, but their predictive power. The Tiwanaku civilization thrived between 300 and 1000 CE, a period of intense solar instability. By tracking how the aurora's positions shifted through the holes over decades, priest astronomers could anticipate solar minimums, prolonged drops in the sun's activity that brought crippling frosts to their high-altitude farmlands. Modern researchers comparing the hole angles with ice core data from nearby glaciers found an eerie correlation. Clusters of holes drilled at steeper angles match precisely with periods of global cooling, when Tiwanaku's quinoa and potato yields plummeted. The true stroke of genius lies in the stone's multi-layered design. Each hole isn't just a simple bore, it's beveled inward at precise angles to filter atmospheric interference. Some have microscopic grooves along their edges that would catch morning dew, creating prism-like effects to enhance auroral visibility. Others align not just with light, but with sound. On still mornings, certain holes produce haunting whistles when the southern auroras or Andean lights are active, caused by ultra-low-frequency atmospheric vibrations. Oral traditions speak of singing stones that warned of coming frosts, a phenomenon acoustics experts have since replicated using laser vibrometry. But the most chilling revelation comes from the stone's silent testimony about collapse. In Tiwanaku's final centuries, the hole patterns grow erratic. New borings overlap old ones at conflicting angles, suggesting increasingly desperate attempts to track unpredictable solar behavior. The last holes drilled before the city's abandonment around 1000 CE point toward auroral positions unseen for 600 years, marking the onset of the medieval warm period. These final cosmic cobbles tell a story not just of astronomical observation, but of a civilization watching its lifeline to the heavens fray beyond repair. Today, standing among these weathered stones as the Altiplano wind hums through their ancient perforations, you can almost hear the echoes of the sky watchers who came before. They didn't just read the cosmos, they wove its rhythms into the very fabric of their city, turning ordinary cobblestones into a dialogue between earth and sky. In an age of solar telescopes and satellite monitors, there's profound humility in these simple holes, a reminder that sometimes the most advanced climate technology isn't found in a lab, but in stones that remember when the sun itself grew cold. Beneath the blinding white expanse of New Mexico's White Sands National Park, where gypsum crystals shimmer like crushed diamonds under the desert sun, lies a library written not in words but in water. These rolling dunes, the largest gypsum field on Earth, hold an extraordinary secret: raindrop impressions frozen in time, delicate dimples pressed into soft mineral beds over 10,000 years ago. Unlike footprints or animal tracks, these gypsum glyphs aren't markings left by living creatures, but by the sky itself. Each perfect circular depression, some no larger than a pea, captures the exact moment a raindrop struck what was once the muddy shore of a vast Pleistocene lake. What makes these impressions extraordinary is their forensic precision. When conditions are just right, when a gentle rain falls on moist gypsum mud, then bakes instantly under the desert sun, the resulting craters fossilize with microscopic accuracy. Modern researchers using laser scanning discovered something astonishing. The angle and depth of each raindrop impression reveals the intensity of long-vanished storms. Tight clusters of deep, overlapping craters point to sudden downpours, while widely spaced shallow marks whisper of gentler showers. By mapping these patterns across the dunes, climatologists have reconstructed entire weather systems from an era when humans were first domesticating dogs. But here's the revelation that rewrites history: these raindrops aren't scattered randomly. They form distinct bands that correspond with ancient shorelines of Lake Otero, a body of water that once covered 1,600 square miles. The highest concentrations of impressions appear in alternating wet and dry layers, proving this wasn't just a temporary oasis, but a climate roller coaster. Some gypsum beds preserve thousands of raindrops per square foot, their overlapping craters forming honeycomb patterns that indicate years of consistent rainfall. Others show abrupt transitions to parched, unmarked layers, the mineral equivalent of a drought alarm. The real genius of this natural archive lies in its chemistry. Gypsum calcium sulfate reacts uniquely to water exposure, forming crystalline structures that lock in meteorological data. When raindrops hit, they leave behind not just physical impressions, but chemical fingerprints trace elements like strontium and magnesium that vary with rainfall acidity. By analyzing these elements, scientists have detected evidence of volcanic winters and distant asteroid impacts that altered global weather patterns. One particularly telling layer from approximately 8,200 years ago shows raindrops embedded with microscopic ash particles, matching the eruption of Mount Mazama in Oregon, proof that White Sands was recording climate events happening continents away. Perhaps most haunting are the human connections woven through this stone weather report. Archaeologists excavating near the dunes found Clovis-era spear points resting atop raindrop layers from a particularly wet period, suggesting early hunters followed the shifting shores of Lake Otero. In the park's western reaches, perfectly preserved footprints of a woman and child stride across a raindrop-studded surface, their steps fossilized alongside the very weather that may have driven their journey. The gypsum preserves these moments with heartbreaking clarity. A child's footprint fills with water from a recent shower, the tiny pool evaporating to leave mineral traces that endure millennia. Today, as climate change dries the American Southwest, these ancient raindrops take on new urgency. By comparing the fossilized storm patterns with modern weather data, researchers have identified cycles of aridity that could predict our future. The dunes' silent testimony suggests that when the rains failed in the past, they didn't taper off gradually, they stopped abruptly, turning lakes to deserts within generations. Standing in the blinding whiteness of White Sands at noon, when heat mirages dance on the horizon, You can almost feel the presence of that vanished lake and hear the whisper of 10,000-year-old raindrops warning that deserts remember what water forgets. Beneath the looming pyramids of Teotihuacan, where the Avenue of the Dead stretches toward distant mountains, lies a garden not of plants, but of polished black glass, the Obsidian Oracle. Thousands of hand-sized obsidian tiles, arranged in geometric grids across the ancient city's ceremonial plazas, shimmer like liquid night under the Mexican sun. At first glance, they appear decorative, but catch them at dawn or dusk, and their true purpose emerges. These volcanic glass mirrors don't just reflect light, they dissect it, casting prismatic patterns that shift with the subtlest changes in atmospheric moisture. Modern archaeologists studying these tiles with spectrometers made a revelation. The angles and intensity of their reflections correlate precisely with historical drought records preserved in nearby lake sediments. The genius of this system lies in obsidian's unique properties. Unlike ordinary stone, this volcanic glass fractures with razor-sharp edges, allowing Teotihuacan's artisans to polish tiles to near-perfect flatness. When sunlight strikes at low angles, the tiles don't just bounce back generic glare, they project distinct light signatures onto adjacent walls. On humid mornings, when the air carries moisture from the Gulf, the reflections appear soft and diffuse, creating overlapping circles of dim amber. During dry spells, the light sharpens into knife-edged blue-white streaks, a phenomenon caused by reduced atmospheric scattering. The tiles essentially turn the sky's humidity into a visible language, one the city's priest astronomers likely interpreted like a meteorological codex. But here's where the oracle's design transcends simple observation. Certain tiles along the pyramid of the sun's western face are slightly concave, engineered to concentrate sunlight into focused beams during the spring equinox. Researchers discovered these focus tiles cast moving dots of light that trace precise paths across calibrated markers, paths that elongate during droughts when the sun's apparent position shifts due to atmospheric refraction. One particular tile, known as the Dry Season Sentinel to excavators, projects a beam that only aligns with a serpent carving on the temple of Quetzalcoatl between February and April, a critical window for predicting summer rains. The stones, in effect, functioned as both calendar and early warning system. The most haunting evidence of the oracle's predictive power comes from its silent testimony about Teotihuacan's collapse. Excavations revealed later generations of tiles were repositioned at increasingly steep angles, as if priests were compensating for worsening aridity. Some show where patterns suggesting constant handling, perhaps adjustments made during desperate ceremonies to summon rain. The final tiles, dating to the city's abandonment around 600 CE, reflect light in chaotic, scattered patterns that match sediment evidence of a century-long megadrought. These last twisted reflections seem to hold a warning we're only now deciphering, that civilizations, no matter how brilliant, cannot outlast the skies that sustain them. Today, standing in Teotihuacan's empty plazas as dawn light ignites the obsidian tiles anew, you can almost hear the whispers of the sky watchers who once read these black mirrors like divine text. They understood something modern meteorology is just relearning, that the atmosphere writes its intentions in light and shadow, waiting for those patient enough to read them. In an age of satellites and Doppler radar, there's profound humility in these ancient glass panels, still faithfully reflecting truths about our fragile relationship with water, climate, and time. What makes these stone gardens so revolutionary isn't just their ability to endure, it's how they transform the landscape itself into a living dialogue between humans and the environment. Think about it, while modern weather stations rely on delicate instruments that require constant maintenance, The Inca's solar sentinels at Machu Picchu still mark solstices with flawless precision after 5 centuries. The Druidic spirals in Ireland, though worn by time, still channel rainwater into patterns that whisper of ancient droughts. These aren't static monuments, they're dynamic systems, engineered to evolve with the very forces they measure. Take the desert grids of Petra as an example. Unlike our digital climate models, which can crash with a power outage, those sandstone channels didn't just record rainfall, they adapted to it. When monsoon patterns shifted, the Nabateans widened the grooves, turning measurement into action. This interplay of observation and adaptation is what sets these gardens apart. They weren't just archives, they were tools for survival, built with a humility modern science often lacks. The stones don't just speak, they listen, responding to the environment in real time. Now imagine applying that philosophy today. Picture a city where buildings do more than shelter, they collect data in their bones. Skyscrapers with facades designed to trap particulate matter, their erosion patterns mapping air quality over decades. Bridges engineered to resonate at frequencies that reveal structural stress from rising floodwaters. Even sidewalks could become climate ledgers, their materials chosen to react visibly to temperature extremes. The key lies in embracing impermanence as part of the design, just as the Celts did with their lichen-lit statues on Easter Island. Those moai didn't fight decay, they incorporated it, letting biological growth become part of the record. But here's the real lesson these ancient gardens offer. Resilience isn't just about durability, but about designing systems that grow wiser with time. The obsidian mirrors of Teotihuacan didn't just reflect light, they refined their predictions over generations, each adjustment a response to centuries of observed patterns. Modern climate science, for all its supercomputers, often resets with each new technology cycle, losing the long-game perspective etched into these stones. There's profound wisdom in the way the Carnac alignments in Brittany were tweaked over millennia. Their wind-tracking stones repositioned as the climate shifted, creating a cumulative intelligence no single generation could achieve alone. Perhaps the most radical idea hidden in these ruins is that data doesn't need to be extracted to be useful. Unlike our obsession with digitizing everything, these stone gardens let information live where it's born, in the wind-carving menhirs, in the moonlight crossing Chaco Canyon's lunar labyrinth. They remind us that sometimes the most powerful records aren't centralized or portable, but rooted in place, as inseparable from their environment as a gypsum dune from the raindrops that shaped it. In an age of cloud storage and brittle hard drives, there's poetic justice in realizing that the oldest climate archive still working flawlessly is the one written in the language of landscape itself. So the next time you walk past a concrete wall or a steel beam, consider this. We're surrounded by materials capable of outlasting civilizations, yet we use them as mute props in our urban theaters. These ancient gardens challenge us to ask what our cities might say 1,000 years from now, not in scattered hard drives or decaying paper, but in the very bones of our buildings, waiting for future generations to decipher the stories we've etched in stone. From solstice-aligned megaliths to tsunami-carved cliffs, these 30-stone gardens stand as a testament to humanity's timeless dialogue with the earth. They whisper a truth we're only now relearning, that the planet's memory isn't stored in libraries or hard drives, but in the patient language of rock and shadow. Consider the sheer audacity of these ancient solutions, the way the Maya encoded eclipse-driven droughts into staircase glyphs, or how Vikings read winter's fury in the ash-layered stones of Iceland. These weren't primitive attempts at science, they were masterclasses in resilience, proving that observation and adaptation could outlast empires. What's most humbling isn't just the accuracy of these stone archives, but their humility. Unlike modern climate tech fragile, energy-hungry, and prone to obsolescence, the Inca's solar markers at Machu Picchu still function flawlessly without a single software update. The desert grids of Petra didn't need batteries to track rainfall. They let the weather itself carve its story into sandstone. There's a profound lesson here about designing systems that endure not through complexity, but through harmony with natural forces. These gardens ask us, why build a sensor when you can grow one? Why invent a hard drive when a mountain remembers? Yet the stones offer more than just historical data. They're mirrors reflecting our own precarious moment. The same patterns etched into Malta's humming hypogeum or Mongolia's frost-fractured deer stones now flicker back to life in our era of melting glaciers and megastorms. When the lichen on Easter Island's Moai statues shows UV spikes 10 times worse than pre-industrial levels, or when Orkney's tide-calibrated cairns drown under rising seas, we're not just studying the past. We're witnessing a warning written across millennia about civilizations that failed to listen to the land. But here's the hopeful twist: these ruins aren't just tombstones. They're blueprints. Imagine modern cities borrowing from the Druids' rainwater spirals, turning storm drains into living climate models. Picture skyscrapers designed like Teotihuacan's obsidian mirrors, their facades translating sunlight into real-time air quality reports. The genius of these ancient gardens wasn't their stone, it was their philosophy. They treated data as something alive, woven into the fabric of daily survival, not locked away in servers. As we face an uncertain climate future, perhaps the greatest gift these stone sentinels offer is perspective. They remind us that change isn't an anomaly, it's Earth's oldest rhythm. The question isn't whether the climate will shift, but whether we'll build systems as adaptable as the Carnac wind stones or as enduring as the gypsum glyphs of white sands. The answers won't come from chasing the next technological fix, but from rediscovering what these civilizations knew, that the most powerful tools often aren't tools at all, but partnerships with the elements themselves. If this journey through stone and time has sparked your curiosity, pass it on. Share it with someone who sees history not as a dead thing, but as a conversation stretching back through the ages. And if you're hungry for more mysteries, from lost technologies to forgotten cultures, hit that subscribe button. We've only just begun to decode the secrets buried in plain sight, waiting for those willing to read the world as our ancestors did, not in pixels but in the patient, enduring poetry of